Hey everyone, this is David Jelks, and I'm of course the originator of the I.M. project, and I can't tell you how thrilled I am to be able to deliver this to you. This is 10 years in the making, and really it's about time. It's really about time I got this project out. To be totally honest, there's a little bit of fear in putting it out there because it's something that, of course, I saw so clearly in my mind, in my life, in the lives of others. But I can never imagine myself being a teacher of this process to the world at large. And with so much support and clear evidence that this is an incredible way to think and to believe and to act, that again, I'm just thrilled to offer this out to you. So let's get it into a proper view here. So when we look at the I.M. project, really it's just about self-identification, identifying who I am. And of course, we know the words I am are very, very powerful. We've heard lots of conversations about I am from the Bible and from modern philosophical literature. So this is really going to be an exploration, not only to determining who we are, as in the I am, but determining how we actually came to that conclusion. And can we choose our character strengths? Can we choose our values? And of course, at the end of the day, can we choose our trajectory in our life? Now, if you look at the Chinese symbol here up on the top here, this actually refers to harmony as opposed to the word balance. I know the word balance is used a lot in conversation, but to me, the word balance is very divisive, meaning that I have a little bit of time to do something over here, and I've got a little bit of time to do something over here. My goal for myself was to actually find harmony inside my life. And so that no matter where I was living from that same space. I was living from that same set of values and ideas. And so that I didn't feel like my life was I was kind of at odds with myself, if that makes sense to you. So it all starts with this, the ability to imagine. Now, as a young child, I could imagine myself as a martial artist, as a cowboy, fighting Indians, back in the old days of the cowboy and the Western movies. I can imagine myself as the Incredible Hulk from the DC comics. So when you're a child, just think of all the things that you imagine and you pretended. And our imaginations were very fertile and rich. We hadn't had really a lot of life experiences to kind of thwart that. As we become adults, of course, when we start thinking and we start imagining, quite often we imagine things on a bit of more of a negative note, as that we're a little concerned about our future, about our finances, about our health, about the welfare of our children, the state of the economy. So our imagination sometimes takes a very negative turn. Not always, but quite often that tends to happen. So what I'm going to ask you today is, can you imagine something better, perhaps what you're currently experiencing in various parts of your life? Now, this is one of my favorite quotes by William James, who was a philosopher back in the 1800s. And when I read it, I felt like it was actually written for me, and maybe that you'll feel the same way. Because if I read it this way, as in the dim background of my mind, I know what I ought to be doing, but somehow I cannot start. Any moment I expect the spell to break, but it does continue, pulse after pulse. And this is his whole process of actually living day to day, knowing that we're not living up to our potential, knowing we're not living up to what we had imagined for our lives at the beginning of our journey. And now we're kind of stuck in this place, waiting for the spell to break, waiting for something beautiful to happen. And yet the misery and the darkness that we perceive to be our life does continue, pulse after pulse. And I look at it as a form of learned helplessness. One of the things that I realized, many years ago, is that the only reason we're unhappy is that there has to be a place of contrast between us knowing better, knowing what we need to be doing, but of course seemingly unable to do it, and then the frustration we feel is because we're stuck in the middle between knowing better and doing better. Because if we didn't know any better, there'd be no reason to be upset. And yet so many people in this world live with a bit of frustration in some parts of their life on an ongoing basis, and yet we have the capacity to do extraordinary things in all areas of our life. So through this program, we're going to focus on these main topics. And of course, there can be subtopics or sub-aspects to these conversations, but this is what we're going to focus on over the next coming weeks. We're going to look at wellness, and whatever wellness means to you. So what I don't want you to do is actually look at these words, and if you feel any opposition to them. So the word wellness doesn't resonate with you. Maybe the word fitness means something better to you. Maybe whatever word or conversation or meaning that you can create in around the idea of wellness, whatever that means to you, whatever that evokes in you, that's going to be the topic you'll want to work on. So again, these are just headings, but they're not absolutes. So whatever wellness means to you, we're going to actually spend a bit of time over the course of the next 8 weeks working on that. And the same thing when it comes to relationships. Whatever relationships mean to you, and how you're currently experiencing relationships, your preferred version of reality when it comes to relationships. We're going to spend some time working on how you viewed them in the past, what your current circumstances are, and then what your hoped for future may look like in the term of course, the topic around relationships. Spirituality, again, can mean any number of things. It may be just your philosophical point of view. It could be Christianity. It could be Buddhism. But whatever spirituality means to you and how it impacts and influences your life, well, we're going to take some time with that as well. Career is quite an important one, of course, because we spend so much time there. And we often spend more time inside of our careers than we do with our own families. So it's a really important conversation, and we want to be able to make sure that inside of our career that we're showing up the best that we can, that we're actually in the right careers for our choice and then how we want to live our life, and that our careers are indeed fulfilling. And contribution, it just seems that humanity, we are designed, hardwired to be contributing creatures. And there's probably very many aspects of our life that you are currently contributing at a very high level, and maybe you're missing that. Maybe it's a bit of an oversight. You don't realize how powerfully you contribute, and of course that leads to a huge amount of gratitude in your life, realizing just how important you are to how the cogs and wheels turn inside your own life. But learning how to be of more contribution and recognizing where you are currently contributing, of course, will be a big part of that conversation. And family, again, this can be a very powerful conversation in both looking at the negative aspects of the family of origin issues that we may experience, and of course, and the family can also be the family of our choosing, not necessarily blood relatives, but our perfect version, the beautiful version of what family means to us, and how we can clean up our negative conversations around family and look at developing a brand new relationship around how family is today and how we perceive it going on in the future. And finances, the world of money, and as they say, money makes the world go around. And one of my favorite conversations around money is, of course, saying money is an amplifier, meaning that money isn't the root of all evil. Money simply amplifies what is. And if you're a good person and you have lots of abundance, the tendency is for you to be able to actually take the abundance in your life and share that around in a form of contribution. But if you're stingy and you're fearful around money, and of course money will just amplify that even more. So we're gonna have a really powerful conversation around finances, and really hopefully illuminate some of the areas where you may be currently stuck. So this whole program is around self-leadership. And self-leadership is simply the process of influencing oneself to establish the self-direction or self-motivation needed to perform or make change. So, and again, this is self-leadership. So this is not about waiting for the world around us to change, or waiting for a spouse to become a better listener, or become a better support. This is about us getting inside, but ourselves, and rewiring how we view our role in the world. And really being able to take back our power, power and the ability to make change in the various aspects of our life that we believe, that we really desire to become better. So it all comes down to this: do you believe in magic? Now, for myself, I do. Now, not in the hocus pocus magic you would see in the illusions in Las Vegas. And maybe some of the restaurants, we used to get magicians going around doing sleight of hand, and a pizza restaurant I used to take my daughter. But I actually believe in magic in the real sense of the term, where there's a mysterious and powerful force out there that we can tap into. Now, philosophers have been talking about it for centuries. Physicists have been talking about it for the last 100 years or so. But there's a real powerful force, and we're not really quite sure what it is absolutely, but we're all I think, collectively agreeing that there's something out there that we have the ability to tap into. And so magic really is just the power to apparently influence the course of events by using mysterious or supernatural forces. Wayne Dyer had quoted an author, Carlos Castaneda, who's an anthropological researcher. And Carlos Castaneda, in one of his books, had said that he was talking about sorcery and looking at the mysticism of years gone by. And he said sorcerers, or those of the source, would actually cast their intention into the source, like a fisherman throwing his net into the ocean. And they had complete faith that what their intentions that they put out there would actually come to be. So just like you being a fisherman and casting your intention out into the ocean, and when you draw the net in, what you intended would always show up. And I know there's people out there like that, and you may have people in your life, or that may even be you, that there's just certain aspects of your life that you just simply make true by the sheer belief in your intention. And I do believe, of course, this is tying into what we used to historically believe as magic, and physics is now telling us that there is a possibility that we can tap into these supernatural forces. And every book that you find, every philosophical text, as in the Bible, for everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be open. And of course, and this conversation has been had across all cultures or through the course of humanity. Spiritual leaders, of course, one of my favorite authors and spiritual leaders, the late Wayne Dyer. You'll see it when you believe it, and not the other way around, right? We're waiting. Most of us are sitting here waiting for proof of things to happen before we take action. And of course, the proof never comes because we have no belief surrounding it. So I love this. You'll see it when you believe it. So the belief has to come first. And philosophers, now Charles Haanel wrote the book, The Master Key System, again, another philosophical mind in the 1800s. This was the book the movie The Secret was written after. The world we see is a reflection of the world within. In the world within may be found infinite wisdom, infinite power, and infinite supply of all that is necessary, waiting for unfoldment, development, and expression. When we recognize these potentialities in the world within, they will take form in the world without. Of course, again, Charles Haanel, The Master Key System. And again, and this is really so powerful because it ties into what the Bible was saying. It ties into what Dr. Wayne Dyer was saying. It's just when we look inside of ourselves. And how many times have we been told that over the course of life? How many authors have you read that? And this is the whole opportunity now. We're actually going to show you the mechanics of how to actually go into the world within and find this infinite wisdom, find this infinite power and the infinite supply, that all that is necessary, waiting for this extraordinary life that is just at our fingertips. And physicist Dr. Fred Alan Wolf, he was one of the physicists that we saw in the movie called What the Bleep Do We Know? If you haven't seen that, I highly recommend you watch that movie. It all boils down to this. The universe does not exist without a perceiver of that universe. I absolutely love that. So let's get into our brain. Let's get into the processing mechanism of reality. So this beautiful 4-ounce piece of gray tissue encased in the dura mater of our skull processes 400 billion bits of information per second. That's an extraordinary bunch of data coming through. The interesting thing is that we only extract or use about 2,000 bits of that data per second, and we filtered all the rest. So out of the 400 billion bits of data per second that comes through, we're only extracting about 2,000 bits of information. So how much reality are we actually missing on a day-to-day basis? How much in the extra, the 300 and like 398 billion bits of data per second coming through? Like, how much of that stuff were we actually missing? Where is the reality? What possibility lies in the information that's being filtered out? And can we, or do we have the ability to access it? So this is how we process information. So we have the event coming in, right? So we see it, we hear it, we feel it, but the event is occurring in the world outside of us. And of course, we're going to perceive it. We're going to perceive it through our filters. Now, the filters of our mind really have a lot to do with our history and our experience of the world. So the filters that we utilize, they delete information coming in, they distort the information coming in, and they generalize the information coming in. So these are what we call our perceptual filters. And so deletion may be in the form of somebody saying they love you, and of course you believe that you're unlovable, so you don't even hear the words being said, and your brain simply deletes out the fact that somebody's expressing their care for you. Distortion is when, to use the old expression, making mountains out of molehills. when we exaggerate the information, we exaggerate the importance of a tragedy, we exaggerate the importance of even ourselves. We make things more about us than actually are required. So the distortion really takes the external reality, and we have to distort it so it matches our current view of the world and our current view of possibilities. And if you don't do that, I'm sure you know someone who does. Generalize. Now, generalization, Jenny comes into comments when people say, "This always happens to me." You know, they always do that. When we generalize, we actually take an occurrence that happens in certain points in time. So let's say every Thursday you take the subway to work, and every Thursday the same smelly guy with a blue suit sits next to you, and then you telling your friend saying, you know, I hate taking the subway. Every time I get on the subway, some smelly person sits next to me. In fact, it's only on Thursday at 7:30 in the morning this one person sits next to you, which makes the ride into town unbearable because this person happens to smell. So generalization has a way of actually ruining or blanketing possibilities. Another great example is that, let's say you're at a dinner party and you're 3 hours in, and somebody comes up and accidentally trips and spills red wine all over your shirt. You leave in a huff back to your car saying, they ruined my whole evening. But no, they actually just poured red wine on your shirt in that moment. But prior to them doing that, you had an incredible time with talking to friends, and you really had a beautiful evening up until that point in time where somebody spilt wine on you. In that one fraction of a second, we distorted and we generalized the event, and we took the event and we washed out every beautiful moment that we had experienced. And if you think about that, of course, we do that, unfortunately, quite a bit through the course of our life, where things that happened 15, 20 years ago in our life, we draw it forward so that it actually interferes and influences every beautiful part of our day. So these filters actually are all based on our ability to delete, distort, and generalize are based on meta programs. And your meta programs are basically the operating software of your mind, which can consist of memories, decisions that we've made, the language that we use, the language that we hear, our values and beliefs, of course, which is just a byproduct of all these pieces, our general attitudes, and this becomes our internal representation of the world. Now, remember when Charles Handel, in the quote prior, he talked about the world, the internal world that we're waiting to unfold. Well, this is the internal world, and this is our internal representation. Inside here, you'll generate the belief of your capacity to actually have an extraordinary life, or you'll develop the belief of your inability to have the life that you want or the health that you want. And internal representation creates our state, right? It's our physiological state and our feeling of our place in the world, our feeling on how we show up, our feeling around our relationships, our feeling around money, right? And this becomes our physiological state, right? So just as I said, so our psychology ends up becoming our biology. There was, in fact, an incredible book. I can't remember the author's name here right off the top of my head, but it was Bruce Lipton actually wrote a book called The Biology of Belief, and really talked about it, just how all these internal processes actually really affected the way our cells communicate. And in fact, the degree of health that we can enjoy or lack really can be really based on all these things going on inside of our mind. So our state, our internal representation, of course, sets our state of being, our emotional state of being, which, of course, is represented in our physiology, which, of course, drives behavior. Now, think about this, as we said before. There's 400 billion bits of data per second coming in, right? That's the external event. And we know, of course, we're deleting, distorting, and generalizing the information. It's being based against our history and what we believe to be true based on what we've experienced until now. And of course, it affects the way we feel, and then the way we feel generates and controls and somehow stimulates our behavior day to day. And we know this to be true, don't we? So the 400 billion bits of data per second coming in, we're only, of course, filtering and accessing such a small tiny bit of it, and which is really unfortunate because so much other possibilities for us out there, which hopefully you'll see in the coming weeks. So our internal representation is based on this. No, this is not an acronym. These are various letters standing for our visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, a sense of smell, and gustatory, a sense of taste. And this is really how we view the world. This is the way that we see the world, we feel the world, we experience the world around us. So our nervous system takes in this raw data, somewhere mixed up in the 400 billion bits of data per second coming in. And of course, we take all these experiences and we match them against what we've already experienced previously. Now, auditory digital, the words we use to label our experience. And this is our self-talk. This is the stuff going on inside of our head, right? The voices inside your head, the ones you can talk to, the ones you have fights with that you don't tell anybody else about. So auditory digital, this is the internal dialogue. So when I first started this journey and started the exploration of how we think and how our mind is actually utilizing the information it's receiving from the outside world, so from that 400 billion bits of data per second, I first started off in the fitness industry doing, of course, training individuals in various aspects of physical development. But it was when I really got more into doing physical rehabilitation that I realized there was some really amazing things going on that we were not aware of. So let's just first start with the perception of movement. So stimulation of sensory receptors, right? So think about your skin. If you put your hands together, you can feel your hands rubbing against each other. So these are sensory receptors. And what they do is they evoke a prior related experience, something that we've experienced before. So evokes it means it actually wakes it up, a prior related experience, into play to aid in the forming of our perception. Because our perceptions are based on something we've already experienced, right? We know whether or not we like apples based on, well, our historical reference, our experience with having eaten apples. We know whether we like hot weather or cold weather, whether we like snow or whether we prefer to be in the sun, based on our historical representation, our experience in with being in the sun or being in the snow. So when it comes to exercise, for example, think about this. We receive information from the body about touch or pressure, and it is then related to a prior experience into play in the formation of perception. So if we look at during exercise, if I grab a hold of a dumbbell, right, let's say a 20-pound dumbbell in my hand, and I close it down on my hand, where do I feel the stress? I feel it in the palm of my hand. Where do I see the stress? I see the stress, of course. I see the representation of that weight sitting in my hand. The muscles closest to that dumbbell are going to react first. So I'll probably end up trying to use my forearm rather than my bicep to move a dumbbell, which I see, of course, day to day when in the gym watching people do exercise incorrectly because they're actually trying to use their old experiences, which is most people lack the experience of training effectively. So they have no reference point in which to do the exercise better. So as I was alluding to, we see the movement of the levers as the exercise. So for example, somebody's looking at, we're looking at a foot here. So imagine being on a leg extension. So you're sitting down on a machine and you, of course, your knees are flexed at 90 degrees and you have the bar across your shins. Now the trainer, perhaps myself, is telling you to actually extend your legs out and move that lever out to almost full extension. And we're going to do repetitions of 10 to 12 repetitions. So you feel the weight at the instep of your foot. You see the weight, of course, there as well. And what you end up trying to do is that you apply pressure to where you feel you apply pressure or force where you feel your leg pressing up against that bar, and you extend it back and forth for 10 to 12 repetitions. Quite often what will happen, of course, people will complain and says, well, if I ask you, where do you feel this? People say, well, I kind of feel at my knee, because your focus is at the end of the lever. If you're doing an exercise like a leg extension is designed to work the muscles of the quadriceps. So you actually have to think about the muscles that you're training, right? Your thigh muscles. If I think about my thigh muscles and I focus on flexing my thigh muscles, I'm not going to feel the pressure in the knee, and the exercise becomes quite different because I'm actually paying attention to the actual order of the exercise. I'm thinking about it rather than letting my reflex, of course, that feeling against my shin, to try to determine exactly how this exercise is supposed to be done. And of course, the other part is that when we're perceiving information is the auditory sensors We receive information decoded from sound waves called speech about how to exercise, and then it's related to an experience to play aid in the formation of a perception. See how we're going here over and over and over again, right? It's always about the incoming information, what we saw, what we heard, what we felt predominantly. So this is more the visual, auditory, kinesthetic aspect. And these are the three we'll be talking about mostly as we go through this program here. Is that these are the three that really become the ones that we want to be able to pay attention to and learn how to develop a powerful awareness of how the information we are actually accessing. And if our historical perceptions, right, our prior experiences are not effective as a foundational premise into making a new life, then we're going to go back and change them. And we'll show you how to do that as time goes on. And of course, the most important thing is that when I was actually working with individuals in the form of a rehabilitative process, is that we realized that an injury to the body was actually not only happen at the level of the muscle or the joint, it also actually happened in the brain. So in order to change how an injury was affecting, let's say, my thigh muscle and affecting my knee, not only did we have to get rid of the inflammation around the knee and make sure the joint was stable, we actually had to change the brain's experience of it. So we started recoding or decoding the brain's experience around the injury, rather than just working at the level of the injury itself. Which brings us to Dr. Seuss. Now, I'm pretty sure that you didn't realize or recognize that Dr. Seuss would play a powerful role, not only in our development as physical human beings, but as spiritual and philosophical human beings. And it's not so much about this beautiful little guy here with the crazy hair, but it's actually the acronym of S.A.M. So I converted S.A.M into this really amazing flow, which is simply stabilize, activate, and mobilize. So for a decade or so, I've been working with clients for all over the world, and we've been using this amazing process. And the brain loves patterns. All right, our brain simply is a pattern recognizing machine, which we call habits. So in order to create a new habit, we actually had to create a new way of thinking. So stabilize, when we're exercising, simply means knees soft, which is low center of gravity, core tight, which is the pelvic floor muscles are braced, and shoulders back and down. We had, for every exercise we have our clients doing, we'd have them go through this process. Now activate. Focus on, flex, or palpate the target muscle. Means, what am I training? So if I'm doing a bicep exercise and I'm stable, my knees are soft, my core is tight, my shoulders are back and down, and then I think about activating, I'm going to focus on flexing my biceps. And if I flex my biceps, and I flex my biceps hard, what will happen is that as the bicep muscles tend to shorten, there's these things called actin and myosin filaments, so the muscle fibers tend to pull over across each other. They're going to shorten and they'll move the weight for me, rather than me trying to lift the weight hoping the bicep gets fully engaged. So going through this process with each and every exercise, we develop clients with incredible strength and people that really didn't think they could pull this off before. Exercise was always a challenge. It felt a bit uncoordinated. Going through this process, the injuries were less. The strength actually came up much more rapidly, and people were really quite astonished at what they could do. But remember, the brain loves a pattern. So let's look at, from the perception of movement in the form of exercise, which people struggle with in this day and age, let's look at our perception of reality. So again, same nervous system, same brain, stimulation of sensory receptors, right? Like that VAKOG model, right? Visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, gustatory. Stimulation of sensory receptors evokes a prior related experience into play to aid in the forming of a perception, right? How beautifully simple is that? We make this stuff so complicated when I think it really comes down to understanding that it's just a really simple process. We just have to understand how our body is actually moving through the world. So kinesthetic perception, feelings, rather than the physical feeling of pressure of lifting a weight or running or doing Pilates or yoga, these are more the emotional context. So the brain gives us feeling feedback about a current event based on what we experienced in the past. So we're trying to, when something is said, when you say something or you hear something being said, and then your brain takes information in and relates the words, right, which is basically a series of coded messages, and it relates to what you heard, and the person you see, and it says, where have we heard this before? And it comes up with a certain emotion that was relative to the experience you had before. not based on what you currently are hearing now. It's what you heard before, the meaning you gave it in your history, right? Is how you're going to be feeling about it now. And I know you know what I'm talking about because you've experienced this time and time again, and this can really create a huge amount of problems for our lives. The visual perception of reality as well. We send visual information to the brain. The brain then forms meaning to it, okay, based on what it is are seeing on our historical experience or previous experiences in life. So think about it. Our brain forms meaning to what it is we are seeing based on our previous experiences. So there's nothing that we're talking about is actually occurring in real time. It's always being related to something we've already experienced. And it's such a crucial point. You have to understand this, that very little is actually happening in the current point in time that becomes a beautiful new experience, because we're always relating it to history. We're always relating to something we already know. And if we're only using what we think we already know, can there be anything new? Well, no, not at all. So this is going to be the beautiful challenge and the wonderful awakening that we all can have here together, is how do we create a brand new experience if nothing is new inside of our mind? Auditory version of reality, sound waves get decoded through our ears that are matched to things we have heard before to create our perception or meaning of what we are currently hearing. Again, it's the same thing. Everything coming in is being related to something we've already experienced. Right? It's just, so this is the beautiful simplicity of reality, whether it's reality in the mechanics of exercising, or whether it's a reality of actually trying to navigate in our day-to-day life through the variety of experiences we have with other people. And there's one other aspect, of course, and this is probably one of the most important ones here. Excuse for the poor quality of the image, but it was actually very, very apropos, I think, for this conversation. And there's an expression that we have as communicators, is saying the meaning of your communication is a response that you get. Meaning it's not what I said, it's what people are hearing. So semantic encoding. So semantics, and I'm sure you've heard the word used before, but semantic encoding is a process of encoding sensory input that has a particular meaning or can be applied to a particular context rather than deriving from a particular sense. Right? So this is actually not talking about, this is not looking at the mechanical specificity of an auditory input or kinesthetic input or visual input. This is really about the information comes in, pulls up a whole set of belief systems and attitudes that we currently hold about our view of the world. So that's what semantic encoding is. And what we see in the world around us, it tends to help us reinforce what we currently believe, which isn't necessarily true. And injuries to the mind, of course, emotional injuries can also be felt in the body, right? So the mind and the body are one. The fact that they geographically seem to have different locations, they're simply all one. And for centuries, for the extent of humankind, we have had a tendency to think of them as separate pieces, but really they're all one. So injuries to the mind can be dealt with as far as the emotional tragedies and the experience that we've had, can be dealt with the same way we deal with the physical injuries of the body, right? So everything is coded in the mind. All our experiences from the day we were born, and some even suggest even in the womb, all our experiences are coded in the mind, right? And they're neither good or bad. It's just a reservoir of information, like a giant library that we access indiscriminately based on what's occurring in our current day-to-day reality. So again, we're going to show you over the next 7 to 8 weeks how you can go in and actually rewire the perceived injuries to our mind, the challenging experiences that we've had, and the limitations that we perceive in our day-to-day life. And here is Sam again. I love this little guy, don't you? So Sam, when it comes to our emotional and our spiritual well-being, again, it all comes to with stability. So as in the physical model, when we were working with clients, we're trying to get them moving forward, what we had to do is actually spend some time helping them decide and helping them to really understand what their core was. And we hear this in the course in physical training, having a strong core is really important to diminish injuries. Well, having a very strong philosophical core is equally as important, if not more so. And we're going to teach you how to choose powerful emotions or powerful character strengths and values. And this is going to be the foundational premise you will build your entire life on, right? So it's just not in some parts of your life, but all parts of your life should be built on a similar set of values and character strengths. From that core strength, from that vantage point, then we're going to activate your goals and dreams and desires, which will look actually quite a bit different. And it's surprisingly so how much different your goals look and what you choose to have in your life, what you think is necessary for you to have a beautiful life. It looks quite different when you actually do it from the framework of a stable set of emotions and character values. And lastly, once these first two aspects of S.A.M have been set up in your emotion, the motion, the movement forward into action towards your goals is beautiful, and it's almost serendipitous. It actually doesn't require the effort you think it does when everything's in line, when you come from a strong core. So over the course of the coming weeks, you're going to become an expert in the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic aspect of who you are as a human being. So guys, I can't tell you how thrilled I am to have you here. Honored that you actually have taken the time to come to explore this journey with me. And I assure you, if you do the work, if you reach out and ask for help when necessary, that you'll experience a life, as Henry David Thoreau had said, a life that's uncommon in this hour. Because so much of the world right now is living a life of quiet desperation. And it's my goal and it's my heartfelt belief that if you follow this process, you'll reach out and ask for help, you will have an extraordinary life, one that's been waiting for you there all this time. So I can't wait to get started, guys. Welcome to the beginning of a brand new chapter of your life, and I'm thrilled to be sharing this journey with you.